Thank you for the great introduction. And let's start. I will share my screen so that you can take a look
Yes.
at this. Give me just a second. Here we go. Uh, I assume that you guys can now see the screen that I'm sharing. Is that correct?
Yes, the screen is visible.
Okay, great. So everybody, welcome. This talk is going to be about AR, VR, XR, and MR, the technology behind these terms, and the future with regards to these technologies. So I will start with AR, right? And before I even get into AR, I'm going to talk about what exactly these words mean, because we know that the R in all of these words stands for reality. But like, what do we mean when we, say these terms? So we will start with AR first. So, AR, it stands for augmented reality. It's an acronym for augmented reality. And augmented reality basically means that we are overlaying digital elements on top of physical elements. It's essentially a superposition of digital elements on top of the elements that already exist in the physical world. The important thing in this case is that this is not interaction, it is just superposition. In this superposition, there can be many different kinds of things. For example, let's say that we have a phone camera, right, looking at something, and that phone camera would see what exactly it's looking at. It would detect different kind of surfaces like planes, maybe vertical surfaces like a wall, and depending upon what the objective of our application is, we can choose to do different things. I will give an example. I have an image here. So take a look at this. Uh, you might have to pay attention to what's in the exact iPad that this person is holding, but what's going on is that we have a construction worker who's working at a construction site, and he's holding an iPad in his hand, and he's looking up at practically nothing, right? So if you look right past the worker, there's just some wooden boats, and there's not an actual building. But the iPad that has an AR application installed, it can detect where you are by many means. Sometimes it can detect with a GPS signal as the geolocation, the same signal that your Google Maps application uses to help you navigate through different cities. It's sometimes use the same signal. Sometimes it can detect, as I said, planes, walls, things like that. So by knowing where you are, the application constructs a 3D model of a building and it shows it to you in the iPad. And the advantage of something like this is that in construction and even some many other businesses that have similar requirements, workers can use one of these applications and they can look at what they're trying to build. They can see what needs to come next. They can see how much they've completed. There's a lot of different ways that this simple application of just putting a 3D model on a screen that is placed there with respect to where you are can achieve. There's quite a few things. So this is essentially AR. Now, moving on, MR. So MR is another term. M and the MR stands for mixed, and R obviously stands for mixed reality. Reality. So overall, MR is an acronym for mixed reality. Now, this is very similar to AR, right? The only main difference here is that we, as people that exist in the physical world, can interact with the digital elements that are being overlaid. Okay. So we are doing superposition still. That is still happening, but we can interact with the digital elements that are being superimposed. So I will move on to the next slide to give an example so I can explain this even better. So in this image, what we are seeing is that we have this gentleman here who is moving a single vertebra from the 3D model of the skeleton. So this kind of an approach in which, as you can see, it's already first doing AR. We have a 3D model of a skeleton of a human body that is being placed in the digital world. So we are doing superpositions. But when the superposition is done, in MR, you have the option, you have the ability to move things around. So in this case, they're studying medicine. And if they want to look at one specific part of a body clearly in more detail, they can move that part, zoom in, and they can look at it more carefully. Or maybe they can just they're trying to restructure things. And maybe in another field, you're not restructuring the body, MR, that's for sure. But In other fields, let's say something like architecture or construction, you could have an actual map of what you're trying to build. And let's say that as an architect, I'm seeing that would it be better if I have a certain building in this location or in another location? Having technology like that can help visualize this even better. Uh, and again, this is just one or two examples. I will show much more examples in this very presentation to help us understand what exactly these technologies are, what they can achieve. So MR, mixed reality, very similar to AR, but along with superposition. Great. Moving forward, we have VR. Right now, VR stands for virtual reality, and this is the one that you've probably heard the most about. So the difference between AR and MR is quite clear, right? The reason I'm talking about them again is because I'm going to draw a parallel here to VR. So coming back to them for a second. So AR is just superposition, right? MR is superposition with interaction. But in VR, we are not there's no superposition at all. We're not superimposing anything. We're not overlaying anything because in VR, there is no concept of the physical world because that's the idea, essentially. You put on VR headset goggles. They don't let you see what's in the physical world. So you're completely looking at things that are in the virtual world. That is essentially the objective with any and all VR applications. That application may be a game, that application may be research, could be construction, could be many other things. I know I've already given the example of construction thrice, but it's one of the fields that is able to use these things well. Uh, Let me show you the definition, which is very quick, is that virtual reality, and as I said, fully in the virtual world, no superposition, you're not overlaying things. And in VR, often you use headset, but you also have things like controllers, and you can have some other specialized equipment. And I will talk about that equipment in just a second. Before I will give an example. So what you're seeing here in this image is a person, right? He has these VR goggles on his head, and you can see that these VR goggles, they do not really have a visor, like you can't see through them. They block your actual vision. The only thing you see when you are wearing goggles like that is what the screen inside is showing you, screen or the projection as to however it works, right? And the second thing that he's holding, so I'm just talking about the equipment here, the input equipment for a VR. He's holding these sticks in both of these hands. Sticks is one way to call them, but you could call them VR controllers. And many different brands make these things. There's Meta equipment available, but the company Meta, the old company that renamed itself from Facebook to Meta, there's many other companies that create equipment for VR, including headsets, controllers, and many other things. So what's happening in this image is that this person who's using this equipment, right? He's controlling a fire extinguisher in this clip, in this video on the TV in the background. Now, this could be a training, right? So you have a person, he's being trained to do a certain thing in a certain situation. This is where VR really shines. We know that VR games these days are getting more and more popular, and I have an example for that too. That's a flight sim. I will get to that in a second. But VR games are getting more and more popular. And the reason for that is that there are some game genres that really benefit from the core intention of virtual reality. The intention being fully immersed in a virtual world, which is one of the main objectives for many games. So it's a pretty good parallel. That's why this started very quickly. Now, what are the other applications is training and research and even sometimes simulation. So simulation, I will show that on this screen right here. What you're seeing is a screenshot of a flight simulator. Now, how does VR essentially relate to simulators? So imagine being a pilot, right? Somebody that is being trained for being a pilot would obviously have to fly a plane. But what if they're still studying and they're not yet ready to be put into a plane? VR is an amazing way to train people to do such complex things. So in this image, you have a lot of radars and a lot of these small equipment that show information about the state that the plane is in. And it's not just the reading of the information, since simulation is also technically interactable, right? You will have buttons that the player can press when they are wearing these VR headsets. Using the controllers, the character that you are playing inside the plane, the character that you're possessing, in a sense, that will be driving the plane in the digital world, right? That character, yes, that character will also have hands. You can control those digital hands with the sticks that I was talking about right here. So those sticks can be used to point and click at various different buttons. And there can be other things as well. For example, a joystick. Now, just like I said, that there's other equipment that many companies provide, along with headsets, sticks. Many companies also provide joysticks, which are very similar to the joysticks that can be found in planes, maybe sometimes in helicopters, maybe in many other vehicles that use a specific kind of joystick. And the objective for that is purely that you can be more immersed in what you're trying to do. Because if I am teaching somebody to, let's say, to fly a helicopter, I don't want them to fly a helicopter using a keyboard because a real helicopter does not have a keyboard, it has a joystick. So these kind of specialized equipment exist that can be used to teach people how to go about operating certain complex equipment. And VR is incredibly helpful in achieving this. All right. So that was a small, definition and introduction towards VR. And now I'm going to do a quick, small recap about these terms that we just talked about before we move forward.